And guys, honestly, I'll be the first to admit that not everything in the Bible is super clear, but I have to say that that's in the minority and it doesn't have any weight on the message of the Bible, major core doctrines, or the gospel itself. Majority of the Bible is pretty straightforward and simple. That's the idea. The gospel is supposed to be simple. And why is it always the Bible? Why don't I ever see any of these groups take, like, I don't know, the Bhagavad Gita or something like that, the Quran, the Book of Mormon? Like, why is it always a distortion of the Bible? Here's my theory. Because nobody tries to counterfeit fool's gold. Nobody tries to distort a bootleg copy of a movie or video game. Nobody tries to distort what's already distorted or twist something that doesn't have an eternal effect on the location of your soul. And honestly, the devil just overplays his hand sometimes, I tell you. The point is that if information is distorted, people wouldn't know any better because they're not allowed to compare what they're being told with another source. So controlling information means promoting the group's teachings as the only valid knowledge. Cults often emphasize that their ideology is the only valid source of truth, discouraging members from questioning or seeking alternative viewpoints. Now notice that it's what they see as truth. This is what's so interesting to me about our weird cultural turn towards relativism and postmodernism. It's not even a wrong turn. We've gone off the road. We are in a ditch and are burning in the black abyss. When people are aligned with reality, this means that they have truth. It's very, very simple. But if truth is inconvenient, what do? You convince people that truth is found in them or their ideologies. If you're in a religious space, another group, or even a college classroom, and you're not allowed to put forth another viewpoint or have an open dialogue because the environment you're in only allows one viewpoint, this is a red flag. Another thing that's kind of interesting and sad at the same time is that cults use something called confession to manipulate members. This is where you're put in a situation where you trust the company you're around and you share personal information that is then later used against you. Or you're manipulated into remembering something correctly. No, that's not the way it happened. Let us help you remember it correctly. Now, next on the BITE model is thought control. Thought control tactics are designed to shape members' thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes to align with the cult's ideology and the leader's directives. This basically means demanding absolute loyalty. Members are required to pledge unwavering loyalty to the cult's leader or doctrine, often to the detriment of their own critical thinking. Critical thinking is almost always downplayed and looked at as a vice. Your mind is a bad thing, and truth is found in the leadership or inside you. This one's huge. I've seen some really manipulative arguments for this, where some people will say, oh no, we are critical thinking. Let's join our group. We critically think over here. And then out of the other side of their mouth, discourage it at the same time. It's very gaslighty and very confusing. This is something I want everybody to pay attention to, the discouragement of critical thinking, all right? Many people are taught what's called thought-stopping techniques, which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts. So if it's not something positive about your group, don't entertain it. Cults and high control groups often discourage members from questioning the teachings or the authority of the leader, as we've already gone over, but they label this as disobedience. You're not as spiritual, you're not as smart or respected if you use your brain. The reason why this is done is very obvious. If you start thinking about what you're being taught, then you might wake up and leave the garbage behind. They can't have that. This is one huge way I see people being controlled. Everyone should take a critical thinking or logic class, in my opinion. On this note, one particularly interesting part of thought control is loaded language. Think of this as if words were people with really low emotional intelligence. These are words or phrases that are filled with emotions, meant to evoke strong emotional reactions or to manipulate people's opinions. This appeals to people's emotional faculties, not their mental ones. No wonder they want you using your emotions and not your brain. In other words, it's not meant to get you to critically think. They're meant to shut down your thinking capabilities and make you upset. These are words and phrases groomed for this sort of thing. The words chosen are designed to provoke an emotional response. It's done on purpose, and then it's supposed to influence the listener's perception through that emotion. Now, kind of piggybacking off of this, another aspect of language that's really interesting is when these groups have like their own language that can be loaded as well, and they have their own meaning altogether. As an example, religious cults, all right, in particular, this is how they create their own sectarian Bibles to fit their theology. And it's filled with unique words and phrases that are unique to that particular sect. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, notoriously have their own translation of the Bible made by Jehovah's Witnesses for their theology. And guys, be very skeptical of any group that has made their own Bible version. Another aspect is labeling dissent as sinful or harmful. Any form of doubt or criticism may be labeled as evil, sinful, or dangerous to dissuade members from questioning the group. Then there's black and white thinking. This is where cults promote like an us versus them mentality, where their beliefs are portrayed as the only truth, fostering a very narrow and dogmatic worldview. Many times it's not that simple, all right? People tend to default to this position because of the many things I've already discussed. They don't want to be seen as an outsider, so they fall into the trenches of black and white thinking. Then there's the discouragement of discussion. You're only to affirm the beliefs you've been taught and not entertain another perspective. We've mentioned this a few times. It's almost like a hostage situation though, where you're unable to really share how you feel on the inside out of fear or scrutiny or being shunned by the group. Now, last on the bite model is emotional control. Now, I've mentioned this before, but emotional controls are the tactics aimed at keeping you obedient. It's manipulating your emotions. You don't want your followers to rely on objective truth. No. You want them to rely on their feelings, whether it's positive or negative. Why? Because feelings are way more easy to manipulate. Therefore, it's easier to control the member. Now, one of the things I remember learning about was love bombing, and I'm sure a few of you know what this is, but cults often shower new recruits with excessive affection, attention, and praise to create a sense of belonging and attachment. And here's the thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with being welcoming, guys. I don't think that every greeter at church or Chick-fil-A is guilty of love bombing. It's the excessive and conditional love and affection given to new recruits as if they will never be loved and more accepted more than they are in this group. And everyone on the outside can't and won't fulfill this. Then there's the shaming and guilt tactics. Members are made to feel guilty or ashamed for any perceived failures, doubts, disobedience, which then reinforces their dependency on the group for redemption. There's a push to create dependency on the group, and cults will provide that emotional support, belonging, and purpose to members, making it difficult for them to imagine leaving the group or living without them. And this is done in a very manipulative way. It's very abusive or toxic. Honestly, what it reminds me of is an abusive relationship. It reminds me of Mother Gothel in the movie Rapunzel, like that really toxic relationship. Nobody else will love you like I will. You can't leave, and the toxic bond is formed, and it can be very powerful. Another aspect is that your entire identity is found in the group. You are nobody without them, and fear is a huge factor to stay. Fear tactics are so effective in making someone obedient to the group or leader. There's fear of independent thinking, being shunned, losing your salvation, and much more. I've learned that if you can make people very afraid or that you've heard from God, you can make them believe just about anything. All right, so that is the bite model. Now, there are a few things I want you guys to keep in mind about this model. Some of these things, if isolated, do not indicate you're part of a cult. So, for example, I actually had a young girl describe her job as a cult because the job required that workers have a dress code and had to do what their boss said. I had to laugh a little bit because they conflated having a job and responsibilities with a boss with cult-like behavior. Not the same thing. Another one, for example, is say in emotional control, right? There's a fear of losing friends if you leave the group, but honestly, this is quite literally true of any group out there. Just ask any high schooler. There's a need to take these as a collective whole and think about if you know of a religion or group that fits these, because this is what mind control is. Now, let me kind of elaborate a little bit more on mind control itself. Everything that we just went over basically is mind control. It's how you control people. But I say that mind control is not the same thing as brainwashing. That's another term that's, I think, been just overused so much that people forget that it actually has a specific definition and meaning and practice. It fits in its own bucket. To put it simply, brainwashing is forced. In mind control, you're coerced. You're tricked. And this is mostly how cults operate. Think of the difference between Orwell's 1984 and like the Truman Show. So mind control involves a systematic and coercive process aimed at gaining control over people's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and beliefs. So as a Christian, when I was learning about mind control and cults, there was one thing that consistently puzzled me. And I had to use 100% of my brain to figure this out, so go with me here. I always wondered why the specific similarities. How can one high control cult group who's never even heard of another one have these same exact things in common to even make them a cult? Like, in other words, they all have the same bite criteria, like they've been cheating off each other's paper, but they've never even been in the same classroom. How does this happen? Well, I think there are a few reasons. All right, so just humor me for a second. First, there's just no doubt in my mind that this is spiritual. In fact, these sorts of correlations and patterns fascinated me so much that it only reinforced my belief in God and that objective truth exists. And second, piggybacking off of that, I find that the more we as a society or as people get away from truth, the more susceptible people are to mind control. I am absolutely shooketh to see how much the world has changed in 10 short years. What used to be confined to religious cults is now found throughout our society. There's a reason why Jesus describes Satan specifically as the father of lies. He doesn't call him the father of another religion, of fake politics, or even the father of hate or negativity. He sits on a throne of lies. Jesus claims to be the way, the truth, and the life. When we take away the foundation of these virtues, God, because we want to go our own way, then all of a sudden, it's anything goes. Truth is then defined by who has the power. Can you see how that's a ripe breeding ground for mind control? You can't have a standard for any of this unless God exists. And all of this is based on what's true or false. If it's true, then it can stand on its own and won't crumble under examination. But if God does not exist, there is no truth, there is no objective moral standard, and every cult in the world can't be wrong. So there's actually a lot more to know about this. If you want to check out the description, there will be more information there, including a series I did on the Jehovah's Witnesses. But let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I missed something? Let me know in the comments below. I know so many of you click on videos like this and ask so many questions because you're wanting to learn more and dig deeper. I want to tell you all about my seminary, Southern Evangelical Seminary, where I received my bachelor's in religious studies, and I am currently, very slowly, a student getting my master's in Christian apologetics. Many people, including myself, are indebted to SES for their no-nonsense stance on biblical and objective truth. They have helped strengthen my Christian walk by holding me accountable scripturally and theologically. If you'd like more information on this, go to ses.edu/Melissa. They offer all kinds of degrees and certificates, so be sure to check them out.